All right, man, let's keep it rolling here. Over to the Big Ten. We're splitting up the SEC conversation. Early tip on Saturday, number 16, Wisconsin at number 7, Purdue. The Boilermakers projected to be 4-point home favorites. I found this fascinating going back to the Michigan game on Tuesday, and you had Purdue. I think you had them, 2.5? So you covered that.
Yeah, by the hook, yeah.
Yeah, the hook went your way in that sense. Going back to the matchup, Purdue spent 14 minutes and 16 seconds of game time in the second half, one foul short of reaching the bonus. That's the longest a power conference team has had to wait for foul number 7 this season by nearly a minute, and also the only time a team waited 6+ minutes in both halves. So Michigan, from a foul standpoint, got pretty lucky, and Ant Wright, who does a really good job, former college basketball player, just breaking down things from a video perspective. Second half, 20 total missed calls, 15 missed calls against Purdue, just 5 for Michigan. So I think Purdue got the wrong end of the shake, and you could argue Purdue should have won the game outright.
I mean, look, I'm not going to sit here and complain. My bet paid the same regardless. But yeah, that was, I mean, thankfully they stormed back, but it was a tough watch. And again, that's part of college basketball. I mean, you could make the same complaints about my St. John's Red Storm and the game that and with that, but you want to know what? Rick Pitino came out and said what everyone should think about basketball. You shouldn't give the refs a position to impact the game, impact the spread. Good teams don't, right? They definitively win. They make it to their errors so that the imbalances of the game, it doesn't make a dent in the final results. So you could sit there and complain, or you can just understand that's the way college basketball is, and that you're more likely than not to see it even out over time than have things be plotted against you to the point that you're going on Twitter and saying that you think Vegas has conspired to, ruin your $2 bet at most. No, they have not.
How about a $2 bet? Because there are people that complain about that too.
I was generous. I'm being very nice, Eli, to the people that do this, because that's the limit to where I would start to complain. Because again, there's so much money involved, obviously, and there's so much more at stake than conspiring to have an under or an over hit. And are there, of course, spread aware players and coaches and all that stuff? Sure, but like on both sides. Everyone wants to win, and you just have to trust it long term. And again, you're probably going to run into like 17-20% of college basketball games having crazy things that happen in your favor, and 17-20% of them that happen against your favor. And the goal is to really just stay hyper focused on that 60% of games where nothing crazy happens, where you actually have a chance for your edge to come home in a fair fight. And you just hope the rest evens out, and you pay some juice on it. But that's the game. And if you don't like the game, don't play the game, but don't get mad at the game. Don't hate the player, right? So again, that's Purdue. That's what's going to happen. There's going to be games in every team's season that are lost or won because of, for lack of a better term, BS, right? And you might get some lucky BS. You might get some unlucky BS. I mean, I saw a game where Elon covered against Monmouth on like a -9 because of like some crazy flagrants. I've seen points go into the bucket after the final horn has sounded. They put time back on and they hit a buzzer beater. You won your Indiana bet on Magic. So, it's someone's on the other side of all this stuff. So,
Anthony Leal would not consider that magic.
But someone's on the other side of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's all going to come around. You can't get too upset about it in either way. Because it's just going to cloud your process in the games where you can win without the BS. So
and don't chase. That's the other thing.
And also, BS is bad stuff, by the way, just for all the kids watching at home gambling. But yeah, don't chase. Don't get upset about it. Just gotta take it on the chin. The best gamblers take losses on the chin and don't stagger. Don't go down, because guess what? A fighter who staggers, when they get back up staggering, it's usually over. There's never a really good getting up, staggering and dazed and going back into the ring, your hands half up. No. Stay focused. Make sure that you're poised and you keep that steel jaw, and you will do much better.
Love it. Justin on his soapbox, presented by Shot Quality let's keep it back to the conversation with Purdue, Michigan.
Sure.
So my take on the foul issue wasn't necessarily, and it was a good conversation for sure, wasn't necessarily, okay, you miss calls happen. Motivationally speaking, Purdue coming back home after that loss, Purdue hasn't lost, I don't think, back-to-back games this season. So you could argue maybe the D word applies to them there, just if you think intuitively and if you care about that kind of stuff. But
Yeah,
yeah, motivationally, this one really favors Purdue to me, just off of that loss. Also, you look at Wisconsin's wins in Big Ten play. Iowa twice, Rutgers, Minnesota, Ohio State, you could argue tournament team, so okay. USC, Nebraska, tournament team, but their win over Nebraska was during the Cornhuskers' 6-game losing streak. Northwestern, when they didn't, for the first time, have Brooks Barnheiser all season. And Indiana. Right. How is Wisconsin, Wisconsin to me is overrated in the betting market, and that's a byproduct a little bit of their AP ranking to an extent. Not that the betting market cares about that, but you look on a game-by-game basis, didn't cover at Maryland. That game was around 5.5. I made it closer to 7. I ended up betting Maryland live, not patting myself on the back. But Wisconsin, my point is, against upper-tier competition, especially with their drop coverage. I mentioned that with Auburn. Wisconsin runs a hell of a lot more drop with Crowell and Winter. And Purdue's ball screen offense has the exact formula with Braden Smith and Fletcher Loyer, whether it's in the mid-range or from behind the arc, to take advantage. You also touched on this ahead of the Michigan game. Purdue was due for their fair share of 3-point variance. We'll say variance instead of regression.
Positive,
if you want to.
Yes.
Positive variance. Yeah. I think that trend, or at least that thought process, should continue in this matchup.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm high on Purdue, but I'm also pretty high on Wisconsin. I mean, I was actually taking a look. I do not super high, but I think I'm decently fair on the market. I was doing some research because I do a futures article every Friday for Inside for Hoops HQ now, and we've been building a small portfolio, and Wisconsin almost made the cut today. And I didn't go with them just because it's a little cheap, and I wish I could get a little bit more value than a 20-1, 18-1 to make the Final Four. That's probably too little, but they have done pretty well against top teams in the last couple of weeks. I'm pretty high on UCLA right now. I think that's a team that's probably making the cut in that, futures buy-in, but they covered against that UCLA team. Maryland's been absolutely ripping. I mean, the Big Ten kind of looks okay, right? So if that's the case, then I don't know. I think at this point you have to start looking almost conference to conference and give teams a little bit of credit for that. I'm pretty low on the Mountain West. I'm a little higher than most in the Big Ten. And then I think it's hard to be higher or lower than anyone on the SEC. They are the number one it's just hard. And then I think I'm pretty market even on Big East. I do know some very sharp people who are low on the Big East, and that's fair. But I am kind of high on the Big Ten, which is weird. But I do think this is a Wisconsin team that can turn it on offensively and also has defensive prowess. So look, I don't know that they make the Final Four run, but second weekend team, it feels like that. If they don't make the second weekend, that's a big letdown for how good this Wisconsin team is. This is going to be a great game. Whatever the line is, I assume is going to be really sharp. I'd lean Purdue a little bit just because, again, they have maybe struggled. They do have the guard play, the spacing, everything you want. But wouldn't be shocked to see this one kind of be right within that realm. Likely a very, very easy pass for me.
Fair enough. I may be on Purdue if this one opens closer to 4. Maybe the market drifts in Wisconsin's direction. To your point, covered against UCLA. I think marginally one way or the other, just depending on the close and the number you got, did or didn't cover against Illinois going back to the beginning of Big Ten play in December, right. Didn't cover against Marquette, and then lost as a short home favorite against Michigan. That was before Michigan, or maybe the start of Michigan really starting to ascend this season. But Purdue's post-up defense and their post-up denial specifically, 8th percentile in terms of percentage of post-ups faced. on synergy, per synergy, and 94th percentile in post-up efficiency allowed. So that's what Wisconsin wants to do, play through Crowell, play through Winter. Not really a mid-range team, unlike last season with Storr and Hepburn. So I don't think they really match up against Purdue's drop coverage that great, even though Tanji can hit his fair share of mid-range jump shots. But yeah, not a bet for me, but maybe a slight lean to Purdue, just depending on the number. You can check out my bets in our Discord channel over at thelines.com. It's free.